Hello, everybody. I'm Judy Brown, one of the managing directors of Governance Junction. Today, we wanted to talk to you regarding the responsibilities and the duties of directors and committee members. Sometimes we might step outside of our lane and not really understand where our obligations actually are. And this is to give you a little bit of insight into the correct direction. Today we have Derek talking to us. He's one of our other directors, and his specialty is CFO roles with over 25 years working with not-for-profits. So thanks for doing this today for us, Derek. She's all yours.
Thanks, Jude. Let's get straight into it. I'll share my screen here as always. And let's go. We are away. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Today, we're getting into the nitty-gritties of director duties and responsibilities. This follows directly on from our previous webinar, which was just setting the scene, I guess, in terms of what do boards do, what do directors do, and what do managers do. And we talked about that, delineation of these roles. It's important to have separation in what the roles were. And in particular, if you are in multiple roles, which happens a lot in charities, multiple roles, important to still maintain that delineation. So, but now we're going to get into, and perhaps I'm hoping that if you've been wondering, well, why is this so important? What does it matter whether I'm making a decision as a director or a manager? I'm hoping with today's webinar that we're going to get the penny to drop for you in terms of, how they are different. And in particular, what your duties and responsibilities as being a director are, and why they're important, and why this delineation is so important, and how you approach your role as a director. So if you are on a board or a committee, and we said this, I'm going to get hung up on titles here, you have to understand these. There's no, oh, this is for somebody else. This is for the lawyers to worry about, or this is for the finance people to worry about. I don't have to really focus too much on the letter of the law, if you like, of what my duties and responsibilities in my governance role are. You do. Very simply, you do. So again, in the vein of posing things as questions, where can I find my duties and responsibilities? Where are they? If I was unclear, where can I go to get them? These days you can just search the internet, but let's go to the sources here, okay? Director duties are defined within the Corporations Act for companies limited by guarantee, and the ACNC, its governance principles for associations, also defines these as well. The duties are in three areas. Firstly, the duty of loyalty and good faith. The second, care and diligence. And the third, the specific statutory duties. Statutory duties mean the legal obligations that you as a director have to abide by. Then it's pretty black and white, folks, on this, okay? There's no gray area on these things. Just to remind you, from our previous webinars, boards make decisions. Individual directors don't make decisions, unless in the delegations they've been delegated to, in a management capacity, to make a decision. Generally, directors do not make decisions. And here is the but. This is the great gotcha in Australian corporate governance, is that boards make decisions, but the directors are held accountable for those decisions as individuals. And so you can't simply sit back and go with the flow and say, hey, the board made the decision, I didn't necessarily agree with it, or I wasn't skilled in that area, it's not my area. Sorry, doesn't work. Won't cut it. Boards make decisions, directors are held accountable as individuals for those decisions. So if the decision goes awry and something happens and somebody comes, a regulator comes and starts to examine the decisions of the board, and there are problems, then they start to then go for directors as individuals. Okay. And this is the important point. And this is why director duties and understanding the duties of loyalty and good faith, care and diligence, and those statutory duties, this is why it's important. Because you can't hide from this behind the veil of, well, I'm on the board and the board made the decision and, I didn't agree or I didn't say anything. I wasn't skilled in this area. None of that matters. You are required, as a director to abide by these areas, and you will be held accountable as an individual. The next question is, but I'm on an executive committee in an association. You're talking about the Corporations Act and things like this. This is for big companies. No. These director duties are the same under common law for associations as they are stipulated and codified in the Corporations Act for directors of companies by limited by guarantee. These same apply for those that are in boards of associations. So there's no getting around that one. Remember, we've talked about this a few weeks ago. Doesn't matter if you're a volunteer. If you're not paid, you are equally held to account for these duties and responsibilities as if you were a paid director of a public listed company. So if you're on a big major Australian listed company and you're paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to be a director there, you have the exact same responsibilities for what you're doing as a volunteer. Okay. And many don't realize that. And I've had this, and I think I've mentioned it in our webinars before, where, we've done training for people and had a director say, look, I've been on this board and volunteer on this for many, many years, which is a problem in itself, by the way, but we'll get into that another time. But I never knew. I thought as a volunteer, I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. And because I believe in the purpose, I'm a volunteer. I never thought that I'd be actually, got some sort of liability here, some sort of responsibility. Well, you do. Does the ASIC have the resources, etc., to chase down every charity around these things? Perhaps not. But I'm not going to say that's never going to happen. Okay. It could very much happen. Duties are defined for associations also in the ACNC governance principles for associations as well. Just a reminder, we talked about this in the most recent webinar. Doesn't matter what you call. Forget labels. Doesn't matter whether you call a director. Doesn't matter whether you're on a board or a committee, whether you remain as an executive committee member or management committee member. Doesn't matter. None of that applies. Titles, badges don't come into this. It's the role you're performing. And whether you're validly appointed, or we talked last time about being a shadow or de facto director, those that may be deemed shadow or de facto directors or alternate directors, these duties and responsibilities are equally applicable. So let's get into it. What do these actually mean? What are these duties? Well, we'll do them one by one here. And each one in itself is a webinar, to be honest. Each one is part of a more detailed training course that we offer at Governance Junction. So we are just giving the kind of top line here. But the first duty is the duties of loyalty and good faith. And this is to act at all times in the best interest of the company. Okay. And this is complex. This is complex because you've got to balance short and long term here. You have to go into your board meetings with the head space that says, I'm here to act in the best interest of the company, not in the interest of myself as Derek Lundberg or Judy Brown, or in the best interest of my family member that has a contract with the organisation to provide cleaning services, or perhaps that the fact that I'm on another board and we do business, these two organisations do business in some way, and that I'm on the board of both companies You have to go in there acting at all times in the best interest of the company. This goes to then issues of conflict of interest and conflict of duty, which we are talking about in our final webinar for 2023. Okay. This is a fundamental part of directors' duties. Secondly, you must act for proper purpose. And that is that you cannot improperly use your position. You can't say, well, I'm the chair and therefore you should do these things for me because I'm going to look favourable onto entering into an agreement with your organisation if you're nice to me. When I say nice, it's seeking some sort of favour or benefit. Okay, so you can't improperly use your position as being on the board, nor can you improperly use information. Okay, you have to keep confidential information confidential. You can't use that information that you are privileged to by being on the board to gain personal advantage. That applies even after you've left the board as well. When you sign up on a board position, you will sign some form of agreement. And with that, we'll come into it, what happens when you leave with respect to confidentiality. We're not going to get into Phoenix activities. These are things, you know, that are particularly relevant in ASIC-based companies and have come about particularly in the building industry where organisations are purposely shut down and then strangely start up again in a different form. Not big thing in not-for-profits, but still part of the duties of loyalty and good faith. So again, the big thing here is conflicts of interest. This is a big thing that comes out of this duty. Tune into our next webinar, okay? I think, and Judy would agree, of all the issues we deal with and of all the questions we get, the issue of conflict of interest comes up in just about every single organisation we deal with. And that
absolutely. If I don't get asked that question, I do tend to worry that they're not watching.
Yeah, and you know, and we'll say this now, yeah, conflict of interest are not necessarily a bad thing. Doesn't mean that they're illegal, but how they handled is really, really important. And in not-for-profits, the nature of not-for-profits, conflicts of interest are absolutely everywhere in every organisation. So tune in to our final one for 2023. Moving on, the second one is duties of care and diligence. And this is a duty that is examined often in retrospect. It's where a receiver, a regulator, or somebody will come into an organisation and look back and say, well, what was the decisions the board made and how was each director involved in that decision? And it is what we call an objective assessment. It's looked at what would a reasonable director do in that situation 6 months ago, 12 months ago, when they made that decision to go and do this thing, which subsequently went bad. What did they do? What sort of level of diligence did they take, due diligence they take into that decision? What did each director do to appraise themselves? What did each director say in making that decision? Were there anybody who stood up and said, no, I don't agree with this? What information did they rely upon? It really, the duty of care and diligence examines the decision-making retrospectively of the board. And it's usually something that pops up when things go bad. Okay. And you can't ignore this one, folks. You can't assume, well, this decision we're making will be good, and therefore I can kind of shortchange this thing. We don't have to overthink it, don't have to overanalyze it. And in most cases, many decisions aren't that involved. But, okay, that doesn't remove this duty of care and due diligence from the responsibilities of directors. It looks at the foreseeable risk versus potential benefit. What could have been at the time reasonably expected? Okay. Did they look at this properly, or were they irresponsible and didn't take care? Basically, that's what they're looking at. Okay. What does this mean for directors on a daily basis? Well, one, you must be familiar with the operations of the business. Now, in the last time we said, we used the term, fingers out, nose in, okay? You can't get involved as a director unless you are delegated to, that you hold some sort of management position as well. You can't get into the detailed operations in terms of pulling levers and stuff, but you have to be familiar with it. You have to be across what the organization is doing, okay? What are the key issues? How does the operation work? What is the fundamental supply chain? What is the client that we serve? How are clients served? Secondly, you've got to stay informed. You have to ask questions of the activities of the company. You can't just simply attend a board meeting, drink the coffee and eat the sandwiches. You have to go there and participate, and you have to ask questions. Don't go with the flow. Do not go with the flow when you're on a board. There's absolutely no place to sit back and say, I don't want to look like an idiot by asking that question. And hopefully the culture of your board is one that allows you to speak up and do that and ask questions, even in the face of feeling like I'm a fool here. I shouldn't, all these very experienced people on the board here with me. I don't want to look like a fool there. Well, sorry, you have to move past that. And you have to ask those questions. And we talk again, 2024, we'll have a whole webinar around the culture of the board and how the mechanics and how do we get that exchange of ideas and questioning. The worst thing you can do is attend a board meeting and not say anything. Okay. You generally have to monitor the company's affairs and policies. You have to look at, well, we have this contract. Are we actually executing to that contract, perhaps? Or, are we dealing with staff properly, etc.? We have to be across those things. You also have to maintain a familiarity with the company's financial position. Okay, it's no good sitting there and say, well, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a finance person. That's not it's all gobbledygook to me. I'll let those people in that corner of the boardroom deal with that. It's just not good enough. If you went in front of the judge and you use that as an excuse, oh, sorry, Your Honor, I'm not an accountant, I'm not au fait with finances, etc. Therefore, I didn't participate in that decision back then 2 years ago. The judge will say, sorry, guilty, not good enough. Everybody on a board has to have a certain base level of understanding of finance and accounting. You don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to be a finance person. You don't have to have a degree in economics. You don't have to be an auditor. But you have to have a base level of understanding. And we'll talk about perhaps different ways you can get that later. You have to read the board papers, and the board papers are sent to you. You have to read them, folks. Don't go to the meeting having not read them. One, it's very disrespectful to other board members to go to a meeting and be thumbing through the papers trying to catch up. But also, personally, as part of your duty responsibilities, you have to be across these things, and that includes the financial statements. You have to make your own inquiries as appropriate. And it unfortunately demands a level of financial literacy. Again, you don't have to go out and become, do post-grad qualifications in accounting or finance or whatever. But there's a base level literacy that is required. But whatever you do, read the papers. And again, if you go in front of the judge and you say, Your Honor, the board papers are 3,000 pages. How am I supposed to digest that? A week out before the board meeting, I'm a very busy person. Judge will say guilty. Said I'm no excuse. In fact, you're on the board. If you don't like the fact there's 3,000 pages in the board papers, well, as the board member, you need to speak up. It is the board that defines how the board papers are presented, how it wants the information. So you have to read those papers, okay? And you have to have a reasonably informed opinion of the company's solvency position. We'll talk about this in the next slide, okay? Is the company able, or the association, able to pay its debts as and when they fall due? A very, very important role of a director to be always asking that question, Okay, what's our cash flow forecast? You know, forget about budgets. Their budgets are fantasy. Sales is flattery. Profit is reality. But cash is king. And so asking for a cash flow forecast is a very valid question to ask, okay? To try and understand in 1 month, 3 months' time, when this bill is due, when this loan repayment is due, when this lease rent payment is due, and this staff payment is due, are we able to meet it? Very important point. So I highlighted there, this requires directors to critically analyse and employ detailed attention, mindset to the matters before them. Don't rely on others. Don't follow the crowd. Even if it isn't your area of expertise. A lot of people on charities and not-for-profits, they're there for the community. They're there for the purpose. But it doesn't relieve them of the responsibility of this particular duty of care and diligence. The third and final one is specific statutory duties. First and foremost, absolutely top of the bill, you cannot trade whilst insolvent. And what that means is, as we said before, is that you are able to pay your debts as and when they are due and payable. So that may not be today, but in a month's time. And then back in the previous duty, are you going to make a decision that's actually going to put you in a position of insolvency in 3 months' time? That's how you've got to frame your decision making. It's illegal, okay? It's illegal to trade whilst insolvent, and directors as individuals, you know, they could face court over this one. This is a biggie for any organisation, small and large, okay? You can't continue to operate and to trade knowing that you're unable to pay your bills, okay? To some extent, larger companies limited by guarantee, are protected under safe harbour provisions only to a very limited extent. Most safe harbour provisions don't work. And that is not applicable to associations because they don't come under the Corporations Act. So let's not be under some illusion that safe harbour provisions, we don't have to worry about it because there are safe harbour provisions. I can wait this out. Okay, forget that. There's also the duty of continuous disclosure. If you know something's gone bad or something has happened, you have a very limited time before you then have to disclose that to the relevant authority or to members even. Dare I forget the members, okay? And so hiding stuff, hoping it will get better, again, is a statutory duty that it'll be illegal for you to do that, basically. And third one, you must disclose related party transactions, and duty as an auditor would understand this one intimate, that when you're audited, if you're subject to audit, then one of the things that will be looked at is, you know, who are you doing business with? Are you doing business with the chair's cousin? You know, and in not-for-profit, in community-based organisations, you know, we use a lot of friends and networks to help us out, okay? And we understand that, and that's fine. That happens, but there is a process for disclosing that and ensuring, again, we go back to this related to conflicts of interest. Other areas, the statutory duty requires us to comply with the myriad of regulators and acts out there that are applying to us as directors. WHS, biggie. Privacy, become very big lately, okay? Environmental law, competition law. If you're a charity operating a social enterprise, competition law comes into it. Fair work. Everybody comes under fair work. The moment you employ somebody, you are there subject to the Fair Work Act, which involves anti-discrimination, modern slavery, money laundering, terrorism financing. As a not-for-profit, you are on a radar for them. I can see webinars in 2024 on those very exciting topics, okay? But unfortunately, ones that are very important, very relevant, and largely misunderstood by directors of charities and not-for-profits, okay? So I'm got you thinking now, this is all very hairy, Judy. What should I do? I think I need to go resign from my position from my board. We don't want you to do that, because you're one of these rare, wonderful people that volunteer for boards. And the last thing that we want to do as Governance Junction is scare you off that. We're just trying to raise awareness and get you on a path of development here around these things. So what should you do? Okay. So firstly, to be a director, keep informed, folks. Keep informed. Don't ignore this whole being on a board issue and ignoring the board papers. And if particularly, and I think it's a mistake sometimes when boards hold meetings every 3 months, because it allows that level of complacency perhaps to creep in, because you're just not exposed to it very often. I think there's some advantage in having a board meeting every month. Of course, there's the problems with, the time required for directors to attend board meetings every month. I get that. But you have to keep informed. You have to keep informed of the financial issues, the non-financial issues, particularly the financial position. This whole solvency thing is so important. Be inquisitive, make inquiries, ask questions. It's healthy to be skeptical. Don't sit there and think, oh, well, I don't want to be the nervous Nelly here. I don't want to be the person that's continuing to ask questions and dumb questions. I'm new to the board, and there's all these people that got all this history there. I don't want to be the person. I don't feel qualified to ask those questions. Forget that. You've got to get that out of your head. You should ask those questions. Be aware of your duties and responsibilities. Keep your eyes open. So today, this webinar helps gain some awareness of these responsibilities. There's more to it than this. And that leads us to the next one, which is developing governance skills. Those governance skills can be developed in different ways. You can do training. You can seek help from people like myself and Judy to help you with that, to get those skills. You can go and get a law degree. I don't know if that will necessarily help you here. It'll be very expensive and painful. You could go be an accountant or a finance person if you really want to subject yourself to that. You can go to places like AICD or the Governance Institute and stuff, and they're fine as well. They have their pros and cons, of course, in going to them. You can do that, but whatever you do, you have to develop your skills. You can do a self-development skills. We would recommend, we've created this organization, Governance Junction, specifically understanding charities and not-for-profits and the limitations in terms of getting these skills that are there for board members and directors. We've tailored this to be an economical way to develop these skills so we can improve people's governance. And finally, have the time. This is a serious commitment of time and attention, Ben. It's really great that you've been asked to be on a board of a charity. It's very flattering when you're appointed, but it is a serious commitment of time and attention. Governance is a profession. It's not a hobby. Okay, you can't treat it anything other than this is a professional pursuit. Okay, and I see this. I've seen colleagues that retire from corporate life as senior executives, very impressive careers, and they say, oh, well, I'm going to go out and get myself on a couple of boards, and that'll do me, and I'll play golf and do that sort of stuff. Every single board you're on takes a lot of time to do the job properly, and I disagree with that notion that in retirement, if you like, after retiring from an executive career, that I can go and do that. I can go play golf and be on a couple of boards and attend a meeting every month or so. It's more to it than that, and that is the wrong approach and mindset. And I think if you have that approach and mindset, you need to reevaluate. Okay. Best thing though is don't be scared. Okay. Don't be scared about being on a board. you're not going to go to jail tomorrow. That's not what we're saying, but we're saying you have to be aware of these duties and responsibilities. And if you keep informed, be inquisitive, be aware, develop your skills and dedicate the time, then you can do this. You can be on a board and you can be comfortable and sleep at night, understanding these duties and responsibilities, that you're doing the right thing and you're doing good, which is most important. So in summary, director duties apply whether you are a volunteer or paid. Okay, so let's get that notion out of our head straight away. Is because I'm a volunteer, these things don't apply to me. Bzz, wrong. Okay, they do. If you are on a board, if you're in a governance position for not-for-profit or a charity, you have to understand these. There's no getting around it. Okay, you can't say, I don't have to worry about that. I have to worry about solvency because I'm not a finance person. Sorry, bzz, wrong. You do. Okay. Remember, boards make decisions. Directors aren't allowed to make decisions by themselves as individuals. There is a process in every board that they make decisions. But directors, if you're on a board, you are held to account for those decisions as individuals. This is the trap. This is the trap here. And so as such, you have to make your own inquiries. You have to stay informed. You have to develop your skills. You have to be inquisitive, ask questions. You have to do all those things. And those duties are in three areas: that of loyalty and good faith, which can be summarized as conflicts of interest, care and diligence in terms of, how did I apply my inquiries in making a decision in the past generally. And then there's those very specific statutory duties. You have to comply with the law. You have to comply with the contracts that your organisation has engaged with. If you have a contract for you've received a grant or you've received a contract from the Commonwealth or such, you have to comply with that. Okay, you as a director, you're responsible to making sure the organisation complies with that. But most importantly, out of all of them, the statutory duties is the one around not trading whilst insolvent, that you understand that you can pay your debts as and when they fall due. Don't be scared of these duties. They're a great thing being on a board, incredibly satisfying work, incredibly interesting work. But it is a profession, it's not a hobby.
Absolutely, Derek. It's something that you need to focus in on. And a lot of people go on with good intentions. Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But if you're not prepared to ask the questions or even read the documents, the number of times I'm sitting in a board meeting, documents have been sent out, we're discussing an issue, and half of the people are either sitting there dumbfounded, not asking any questions, or trying to answer a question when they haven't actually read the documentation, because there's nothing worse, I always find, is when you're working with people and they're listening to respond, they're not listening to understand.
Exactly. And it's a famous Covey in the 7 Habits, that old chestnut that's been around for decades, of the late Stephen Covey. Seek first to understand, then be understood.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen.
Yeah, you don't go to a board meeting wanting to appraise everybody of your unique skills and knowledge in an area. You have to first seek to understand, and that is, participating, reading the papers, asking, making your own inquiries and such.
And it's okay not to agree with the board, because the board votes on it as a majority. There are times that the board will do things when you're a board member that you may not be really happy with, but as long as you put your thoughts forward, this is why I think this is a good or bad idea, X, Y, and Z. And if the majority of the board disagree with you, that's okay. It's not personal.
It's tacit acceptance is really dangerous, Judy. Tacit acceptance. It's sitting there saying nothing. You've accepted the board's decision.
Absolutely. And there's nothing worse than talking to people after a board meeting and they come to you and they say, I didn't agree with that decision. Well, why didn't you say anything about it at the time?
Yeah, exactly. You needed to speak up. And, if this, and this is where the minutes come into this. And we'll talk about the minutes next year too, because it's the only real legal document we have from a board meeting. And it's
absolutely
important
and
that
there's nothing disappointing when people do minutes of meetings and they doctor them. They remove important questions that have been asked with no answer, because it gives you no paper trail when you go back to look at it years later if you have to go back. And I have walked into due diligence situations where they couldn't decide if the chair should be the chair for another 12 months due to the Constitution, or if the chair's tenure is up.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of going back as far as 2013 to
Yeah.
actually make that decision.
That happens so often. That exact scenario happens so often where it is not understood about tenures, or under the basis of, how was somebody appointed to the board? How was the chair appointed, and on what basis, and all that? And apart from that lack of clarity, it just takes up so much time. And the board has so little. When you're only meeting once a month, once a quarter, the board has so little time to do the work they've got to do. And I think, people have been watching our webinars would say, geez, it's involved. There's a lot in this. And you can't waste time on those types of things. You need to focus on setting direction and strategy moving forward, not going back to 2013, figuring out, am I the valid chair or not, And unfortunately, many not-for-profits and charities do spend their time doing a lot of that stuff.
It's quite amazing. It really is. And not making a decision as a board member. Sometimes you'll see the chair making a decision with management and then going back after and telling the rest of the board, and the rest of the board are horrified.
Exactly. And these are the dynamics that play out. And again, pointing us to our series next year about that relationship between the chair and the CEO. It can be too friendly, or it can be too adversarial.
Absolutely.
So, all this stuff comes to the dynamics of this, and all this stuff, that we talk about, the mix of the board, the dynamics of the chair and the CEO, how decisions are made, et cetera, all point back, all roads lead back to director duties and responsibilities.
Absolutely. Well, here's a question for you. If you're entering a board and you're new to the board, what's the first 3 things, Derek, do you ask for from the board when you first start?
The first 3 things that I ask for, and this is prior to, asking to meet certain aspects, managers and other board members. Firstly, the Constitution.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. What's your second one?
It is the legal basis of that. I would like to see the delegations policy. Does such thing exist? Because you would know, and I know, Judy, that many not-for-profits know such policy exists.
Exactly.
And so if it doesn't exist, that would be not necessarily, I'm not going to go near this board because it doesn't have a delegations policy. Bit of a flag, though, for me. And then the second one is I want to see minutes. I want to see recent minutes, because these are the legal documents, that then set for me a tone here. The minutes tell me a lot about what's been going on and the standards of governance and such.
Absolutely.
Those 3 things, and then it goes. Again, we'll talk about this some other time too, about taking on a new position. Then it goes into further due diligence that you would take in terms of stepping onto a board. Would you do those 3 things, Judy, when you're asked to go on your board?
Absolutely. That'd be my first 3 things. And then my next lot would be, can I see the latest budget and your strategy?
Yeah, and definitely I would want to see things like a cash flow forecast. And again, the term cash flow forecast, the notion of cash flow forecast, is foreign to so many organizations as well, because accountants don't like, no disrespect to accountants, Judy, but accountants don't like cash flow forecasts, because cash flow forecast is, cash flow summaries are hard documents. They report cash events in the past, whereas a cash flow forecast is an element of, predicting the future in that. And of course, that is counter to accounting, to accountants to be thinking like that, right?
Absolutely. It's not in their genome. I don't think the DNA strands quite do it.
But then things like around the strategy document is, important document, as you say, cash flow forecast, but then the assumptions that underpin that, the risk profile, risk appetite, that they're absolute musts of documents that you would look to assess what's been going on here. Is this something that I want to stick my neck out and go on to? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But of course, you've got to have passion for the cause too. If you haven't got passion for the cause, you don't make a lot of money from being on a not-for-profit board. We all know that.
Yeah, you do it out of love. It's definitely
you've got to
love.
do it passionate for the cause. You got to.
Exactly. Okay. Always. Well, that was a really interesting subject. I guess next year is our next round. Have we got sort of a list of directions we were thinking of going in?
Look, we're going to look at minutes. We're going to look at board mix, and with that recruiting minutes, we're going to look at, because they're a legal document, and minutes, there's a very, we have two ends of the scale here in viewpoints, and neither of them is wrong, by the way, in terms of how minutes are put together. So you want to look at the 2 points of view of putting minutes together. Board mix, and many organisations now within their constitutions are documenting within the constitution day one about the mix of people. And here we're going to talk about things like independence. What does that mean? One there for you, Jude, around the auditors' expectations. What would auditors be?
Absolutely. Yeah, the number of people don't know what we do. They don't understand what we do, and trying to explain it is always a really interesting experience. You get some really, really strange responses at times too.
Yeah. Effective meetings, looking at, you get so little time when you're at the meeting. You need to make use of that meeting. You don't want to waste it on stuff because people haven't read papers, or, because of a wrong focus or an ineffective chair, which happens too. Then we've got other things like key risk issues around privacy, money laundering, terrorism financing, all big for, you're thinking, I'm this little charity, I don't have to worry about anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism finance. We actually do.
Absolutely, because a lot of scammers actually approach much smaller not-for-profits because they don't have these policies in place. They don't have an understanding of the wording when someone strange sends them an email.
Overnight, you could lose access to your bank accounts, and you think, what happened there? It's my money. And so we're going to talk about that one. We're going to talk about subcommittees. These are the workhorses of the board. A lot of the work's done, but you've got to be careful how you set those up. We're going to talk about the chair, delegations. Obviously, we talked about that, agendas. And look, I think recently we've added quite a few different things to that. There's just endless numbers of topics here that we will fill these webinars with. So we're looking forward to that in 2024. We have one more for 23, which is an important one to close out. That's the issue of conflicts of interest, which we talked about today. So
absolutely, and that will be a big one.
That's such a, as we talked about today, Jude. Every client we deal with, this comes up sometime.
Absolutely, and they're quite frightened of it. And as you say, a conflict of interest is not necessarily a bad thing. We're just acknowledging and trying to be transparent.
Oh, and there are, particularly if you're a company, you have to comply with a process on this, and we need to understand what that is. So, but so that's coming up before the end of 2023. So we'll finish that year with that. So,
with that, I think we'll sign out, and everyone can enjoy our little library. It's getting much larger, which is fantastic. If anybody would like to sort of comment on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page to give us any ideas of concerns they're having, we can add that to our list.
Yep. No, and look, if anyone's got any idea for topics, if they've got something, hey, I really don't understand this or whatever, they can either suggest a topic for one of our YouTube videos here, or perhaps contact us direct and ask us a question. We're open that.
Absolutely.
We're not lawyers. We're not going to start the clock on you when you ring us. Okay.
No, not at all.
No disrespect to lawyers out there.
No.
All righty.
Thanks kindly. Have a great day.
See ya.